the war in Israel, or I should say the war in Gaza, or I don't even know if I should say the attack of Gaza, whatever you call it.
Yes.
I don't know if you can call it a war when one side doesn't have a military, but whatever you call that. Since that, you've seen this kind of divide grow, where I think largely neoconservatism had been rejected by the voters,
yes,
by the Republican voters. But when Israel came up, it's a little bit different. I don't know exactly.
Well,
but
neoconservatism is like chicken pox. Like you think you defeat it, and then when your defenses are down, it comes back as shingles.
You're like, oh crap, they're Democrats now? Jesus.
No,
I didn't see. How does that come?
It just lays dormant. It's always there.
Yeah.
But when it comes back in its second iteration, when it manifests again, it is disabling. And that's what we're watching. Like if there's one thing I wanted to help do, it's get rid of that worldview, but it seems stronger than ever.
This is an interview. I don't know how I missed this one. It's Dave Smith on Tucker Carlson. I know many of you enjoyed the interview with Tucker Carlson and Jeffrey Sachs. I'm hoping this one will be just as good as even better. I watched the whole interview and found the most highlighted parts and clipped them into one short video, so you don't have to watch the whole entire thing. I hope you appreciate that. If you do, make sure you give me a like and subscribe to my channel. Let's get this video out to a larger audience and do our part in changing minds of other people. We are one of the fastest growing channels in this subject. So please, please, please support, like this video, subscribe to my channel. That's all I'm asking for. Thank you.
Well, I think you have done a lot. I mean, I really
Not
do.
really. I mean, if you can, it's like everybody in the Republican Party is completely on board with the idea that wars, non-essential wars, make America better or something. That's so nuts.
It's what's so wild to me about it is just after the 20 years of terror wars that have just been such a complete disaster, that America would still be entering these conflicts that are very clearly wars of choice. You could read, and anyone can go read this. You find it's called A Clean Break, A New Strategy for Securing the Realm. It was a letter written by Richard Pearl and David Wormser and a few other neoconservatives.
Oh, I remember this.
Became very powerful in the George W. Bush administration.
I knew all those guys.
So this was written in 1996, and it was not written to Bill Clinton. It was not written to Bob Dole, who was running for president that year. It was written to Benjamin Netanyahu, who had just become the prime minister of Israel. And the clean break, the strategy was a break from this whole peace process nonsense that Yitzhak Rabin and them had agreed to. And basically it was like, well, look, it was the beginning laying down of what the Netanyahu doctrine was ultimately to be, which has culminated in a wild success, as you know. And so basically the idea was like, well, look, forget all of this, like this peace process where you focus on land exchanges and whose land belongs to who. That's all kind of lame. And so what really you should do is reach out to the broader Arab world, kind of make arrangements with them so you don't have to go through this peace process. And that starts with overthrowing Saddam Hussein. And like, that's our first step here. And then there's several other steps, but it's outlining why we want Saddam Hussein overthrown. And so then this was for Israel's interests. We wanted this war in 1996. Now, by the way, there's other things. I'm not like saying like Israel is 100% pulling the strings of the American government. I think a big part of the reason why the war ended up happening was also because George W. Bush had a personal beef against Saddam Hussein. He tried to have his father killed.
I should say what you already know, which is we don't really know that much about 9/11 because so many documents remain classified 23 years later. And why would that be? There's no excuse for that. Every one of them should be released this afternoon. They won't be. So we can only speculate to some extent, but like, what should we be suspicious of the official explanation for 9/11?
I think you should always be suspicious of any government explanation for anything. I mean, like that should always be your starting point. Like, I'm not saying you should jump to a conclusion about what happened, and I think this is, by the way, this is my worldview that has served me very well over the I basically, my podcast kind of took off, and a big part of that is like Joe Rogan and stuff like that. But I've just kind of been consistently right on the biggest issues. I have a good track record now.
Yes.
Like I was in real time, like calling out how obviously Trump was not a Russian agent. And in real time, I was saying the Hunter Biden laptop was real. And in real time, I was against lockdowns from the very beginning. And I was and it's all because I operate from a worldview of recognizing the government as essentially a criminal gang.
Yes.
They're basically the mafia who won. and now they just rule. You know what I mean? And like, so
having taken out the real and much less benign actual mafia,
and that's also, and that's part of the reason why they don't like the mafia, because you're a competing gang. You're not allowed to be the gang here. We're the gang. And so when you look at things through that frame, yes, they're all a bunch of liars and they're power brokers. And so, yeah, I don't trust anything they say. I try to just go off what I know. So we don't know exactly what happened on 9/11. We do know at this point that there was pretty high level Saudi involvement, and that that the government knew that and had no interest in punishing those people, and in fact still wanted to continue doing business with them. We do know that we were comfortable enough fighting on the same side as Al-Qaeda in Libya, in Syria, and in Yemen. So it didn't seem like fighting Al-Qaeda wasn't really the motivating force. And like I said, we know that this group of neocons who hijacked the federal government wanted these wars, and after 9/11 used that opportunity to get them. Use that opportunity. But anyway, so the point I was making about not being an expert, but being able to shatter this narrative, it's like...
Wait, so just to be clear though, do you think it's possible that people within the U.S. government were aware this was going to happen before?
Sure, absolutely, that's possible. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So Dave Smith just said that he thinks people in the government knew 9/11 was going to happen. That's wild. So few things I wanted to mention right here. First of all, Tucker Carlson bringing on Dave Smith, very interesting, because I would think he would be one of those people that are just super pro-Israel, but he's not. He's actually very, very sympathetic to the people dying in Gaza, like the women and children. And I'm surprised he hasn't been canceled yet. I said this a few times. Another thing I want to point out is that when 9/11 happened, I was like 9 years old. I remember growing up and seeing Tucker Carlson. He was one of the most racist guys on Fox News. I think, on Fox News. All he would be doing is just spitting nonsense and all this hatred towards Muslims. So to see this evolution of him, actually being a lot more sympathetic to Muslims, and then also just seeing him open to the idea of Israeli involvement, it's very interesting. I mean, I can't say I'm not happy. I'm happy to see this evolution in Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put that past them. It's kind of, listen, these are people who are, and I think this is one of the things that people have been waking up to a lot more recently. And this has led to some wild conspiracies, some of which are not true, some of which might be true. But people have been waking up more and more to recognizing, like, who are these people? You know what I mean? Like, these people who have like real power in our government, like, who are these people? I mean, you take someone like Hillary Clinton. So it's like, okay, so your husband is a rapist. I mean, he's been accused of rape by multiple women. And these are people who are like, Bohemian Grove is real. They're doing really weird stuff there. Jeffrey Epstein was real. There was a like pedophile ring that a lot of the most powerful people were connected to, at least knew about, and didn't feel like blowing the whistle on it. These are people who are comfortable making decisions where babies will die, like mass slaughter will happen, and they can sleep at night. And like, I'm not saying like a situation where either our babies are going to die or their babies are going to die, and there's a horrible decision, but I have to make this. A decision where like, no, we're choosing this to happen, and they're kind of okay with that. And you kind of wake up to like, so when you say like, is it possible that they'd kill Americans or be complicit in that? Like, yeah, of course that's possible. I don't have enough evidence to like prove that that's the case, but I can prove that they wanted these wars. And then when the opportunity to get them came, they lied through their fucking teeth in order to sell the wars. Look, General Wesley Clark, he said, as I'm sure you've seen his Democracy Now! Interview, where he said that he saw the plans in late 2001, that it wasn't just that we were going into Iraq, but that we were also going to have regime change in Syria and several other countries. But then when they go to start the regime change in Syria, 2013 or whatever, they started in 2012. But then they go, we have to overthrow Assad because, he's killing all of his own people. It's like, no. You wanted to overthrow Assad over a decade ago. Don't give me this bullshit that this is some new plan now. So I do know that they will lie through their teeth to the American people. Like this, I know for certain that they will lie through their teeth to the American people to get enough public support for mass slaughter campaigns, because they want those campaigns for completely different reasons. And again, like I said before, this isn't speculation. They wrote this in their own words. One of the reasons they wanted to remake the Middle East in this way is because they thought it was in Israel's interest.
Unbelievable. So what Dave Smith is saying, and he said this before, is that essentially through paying millions of dollars to our politicians, AIPAC and Israel was able to receive billions of dollars every year in aid, and then have the United States, the most strongest military in the world, basically carry out their foreign policy for them, which you could argue is trillions of dollars. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And that to me is like just totally unacceptable as an American.
Yeah, like why are we carrying out the foreign policy of a different country? How wild is that?
That you're, first off, you're lying to the people of this country, and you're doing something with a foreign country's interest in mind. That's just like so appalling that I think people should be like publicly hung for it.
But it's
after a trial, after a fair trial, they should be.
I mean,
oh man, yeah, that was a slip of the tongue.
It's not America first, I would say that.
It's kind of hard to
to square that circle.
Yes.
But what's interesting is that so many people who talk about America first or whatever, they're fully on board with this. They attack anyone who's not. I had a thoroughly bizarre experience the other day, and maybe you can shed light on what it means, because I don't fully understand it. But I was doing Rogan's podcast at your urging. So thank you for that. I had a great time.
I love the podcast.
Yeah, it was super, super fun. But it's very long. It was like 3 hours long. So, and I can't stop talking. So I'm another thing. And I'm going on about whatever, And at one point, I just blurted out for like 15 seconds something I've thought about recently, which is the use of the nuclear bombs, the only time they have been used, in August of 1945 against Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. Complex topic. A lot of it's not publicly well known. Okay. But just the bottom line fact that we dropped, particularly the bomb on Nagasaki, which was the Christian capital of Japan, by the way, that bomb was dropped on a church and killed, 3/4 of the Christians in the city, which bothers me as a Christian. But leaving even that aside, it killed civilians. It wasn't dropped on a military base. It was killed civilians. And like, I get why people did it, or maybe I don't get it, but I think 80 years later, we can say, not something to brag about, incinerating civilians. I don't care what the context is. That's evil. That's basically all I said.
Wow. See, this is the part of Tucker Carlson that makes me realize that the guy's getting a heart now, because I just couldn't see him talking like this, 15 years ago.
Holy shit. Did I get attacked from the right? And I thought, and I don't even follow the attacks on me ever, but I kept getting texts from people. Oh, I can't believe you said that. Or people are mad at you for saying that. And I thought, of all the dumb, cruel, untrue things I have said over 30 years of just talking in public, a lot of which I regret, and I hope I've apologized for every bad thing I've said.
Again, I know I'm keep interrupting him, but this is maturity from him. He regrets a lot of the things he said, which is insane. And one of the things that Tucker Carlson also said just a few minutes ago is that, he's America first. And a lot of these pro-Israeli policies does not really sound like America first. And it's so true. And I'm wondering, how is everyone else on the right okay with it? Another thing I wanted to point out is that Tucker Carlson recently had a post. It was just, I think, yesterday or maybe the day before, where he said that the U.S. should not go into war with Iran, especially with all the tariffs we have right now. We cannot afford to do that right now. It's not a good idea. And basically anyone, all these neocons need to stop pushing us into war with Iran, and anyone who pushes us into it is definitely not an ally and is probably an enemy. And I think he was talking about Israel there. I was like, wow, Tucker Carlson's going hard.
But I've said a lot of really things are impossible to defend. That's what they attack me on?
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, and just the fact, like, even as you're saying, like, again, if you want to attack you on something like, hey, you supported the war in Iraq.
Oh, shit.
Like, there's a thing like, I really got this wrong. And it was, what a, like, twisted society we live in. I
defended Mitt Romney when he ran.
Yeah. I mean, but guys, all of the people who got all of these wars wrong don't receive as much outrage as you for saying after the war was won. And by the way, like, if you know anything about it, it was 5-star general Dwight Eisenhower was against the nuke. He said it was unnecessary. They were ready to negotiate a surrender. We didn't need to do this. But also, there's just
no. But I didn't even get into the details of that.
No, you were just saying
specific
it's
thing.
wrong on its face.
Exactly. I was just the principle of using nuclear weapons against a civilian population. You could construct in your mind a scenario where you could justify it, I guess, but it's still sort of in the cold light of day hard to defend incinerating civilians. By the way, with incendiary bombs too, or conventional bombs, as in Dresden, or it's just bad. Why would that make people on the right so mad? What is that?
So this is my kind of theory on it, is that if you'll kind of notice World War II, which is a long time ago at this point, generates this enormous, you said the thing, I love when you said that, about how you could tell there's an infection because you touch it.
Yes.
And people recoil.
Yes.
You can tell something's infected there, right?
Yes.
And I could sit here all day long and talk about how we shouldn't have fought World War I. And which we shouldn't have fought.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. This
will generate no controversy. I could say this all day long and go through how Woodrow Wilson was completely wrong to get us involved in World War I. And this was,
the Lusitania was bullshit.
Yes. Nobody cares. This will not. I will not hear anything on Twitter tomorrow about saying this. I could talk about how Vietnam was a complete disaster, or also lied into that war, and how many people died in it. Korea, Iraq, all of that. World War II is the one that is
But
infected.
what's so weird about that is clearly the most important, and we talked about this last night, the most important thing in your life is your marriage and your children.
Yes.
So if I said to you, Dave Smith, I think you have a shitty marriage, you would be like, no, I don't actually. I have a nice marriage. That wouldn't, you wouldn't be mad about that. You'd be like, I don't think you really know. Because you're not hiding anything.
Right.
So
well, so here's the
thing.
Well, here's what it is, right? And I want to be very clear just when I say this. If you're trying to read between the lines here, I'm not saying that the Holocaust didn't happen or something like that. It did happen, and
those people died. Yeah.
Yes, those people are dead. My family was involved in it. It was one of the worst things that's ever happened.
I agree.
World. But look, World War II is the origin story of the American empire. That's when we really became the world empire. And it's the justification for the entire empire. It's why every single neocon, every single hawk goes back to World War II anytime there's a war, because that's what's used to justify every other war. We stopped Hitler, okay? We'd all be speaking German if it wasn't for the American military. So how dare you question the next thing? That's why Saddam Hussein was Hitler. Milosevic was Hitler.
Putin's Hitler.
Putin's Hitler. They're all Hitler. I can't tell you how many people I've heard and I've debated some of these people who defending Israel's attack on Gaza by going, well, we killed a lot of civilians in World War II, so just like that, as if Hamas are the Nazis. It's anything comparable. But the thing is that, so when you talk about World War II, you're only allowed to have the official narrative on it. And here it is. We all know what it is, right? Who are you, Neville Chamberlain? You mean you don't want to go to war? You want to appease? That's the only lesson of history that you're allowed to learn, is that appeasement doesn't work. Presumably, we should have started the war earlier, I guess, is the story. But by the way, you can never learn the lesson of history that sometimes preemptive wars don't work. Sometimes, ruthless power doesn't work. Maybe sometimes appeasement would be better than that, It's there's only one, and so that's the lesson. By the way, it's the same thing with Putin. Everybody who, if you didn't support the war, I know you got called this. I watched you get called this. You were never Chamberlain for not wanting to back Ukraine immediately in the war, right? It's the only lesson in history. Now, you can't look at World War II and say, hey, maybe Danzig was the lesson. Maybe exactly. War guarantees were the lesson. And I'm not even saying they are, maybe not, but objectively speaking, if we want to be honest about World War II is the worst thing that ever happened in the history of the world.
Yes, by definition.
The worst thing that ever happened. More people killed. The Holocaust happened in the middle of it. Tens of millions of people died in European conflict, brutal conflict on all sides.
It destroyed the greatest continent.
Yes. Now, right, exactly. Now, okay. If you want, they say winners of wars write the history, and man, did the Nazis and Imperial Japan make it really easy. Because they were so evil. They were like caricatures of evil, and they really were. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, because Stalin's army wasn't high-fiving everybody on the way in to Germany.
They raped every woman in Germany.
Right. I mean, it's there's a lot of, but any sane person, if you look back at World War II, and you recognize the worst thing that ever happened, you would try to say, how could we have avoided this?
Exactly.
What could we have done to not make this happen? The lesson should be oh my God, we imposed Versailles on the Germans and insisted on humiliating them internationally, and look at the backlash of this. And then, whatever. There's all this stuff. A lot of it comes down to entering World War I, and World War II was really an extension of that.
That's right.
But it's like the only lesson you're allowed to take away is this. But, you know, I really liked the way you put it on Rogan, and it was just kind of a quick aside. But look, it's just so evil on its face that I know human beings are amazing at doing mental gymnastics to justify anything. I've been doing a lot of debates on the topic of Israel, and I've been watching this firsthand. You know, it's like you could watch videos every day on Twitter of babies, you know, like suffocating to death under rubble, and like someone will justify that. Someone will say, well, actually we need to do this because whatever, all of Hamas must be destroyed. Why exactly? Like, why is it absolutely necessary? You're telling me Israel, the fortress of the world, can't just not drop the ball again? You know what I mean? Like, there's not some other answer other than this, and of course America must fund it for reasons. But
America must fund it, even though Israel has a surplus in their budget, even though they have universal health care. Like, do they need us funding them? Also, we saw when a huge country that everyone was worried about Iran's military. Iran shot missiles, like I think like dozens, hundreds of them on Israel. Nothing touched them. Nothing. Like they had some touch here and there in like military bases, but a fraction. So we're worried about Hamas? Like, come on, man. Come on.
It's like, no, actually, that is just evil. And the onus is on you to exhaust every single other option before doing that.
But it's just interesting. It's like, I've done a lot of evil things in my life, and I really regret it. I think all of us are capable of evil. I've never committed genocide or anything, but I mean, I've been pointlessly cruel or deceptive. Sure.
Uh-oh. Is that Tucker Carlson subtly saying that Israel is committing genocide on Gaza? Interesting. One more reminder, everyone, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel. We get this video out to a larger audience. Really helps get the message out there. If you really want to help support the channel, become a member. It's only $2.99 a month. It really helps out with the revenue of this channel because a lot of the content gets demonetized. The link will be in the description below. I appreciate all of your support. Thank you so much.
You know, and I'm ashamed of it. So I'm not judging even Harry Truman for this, but it's like, why is that so offensive? And the other question I have, and maybe you've got insight into this, I don't know that much. I've read a lot about World War II. I'm not an expert, but like this worship of Churchill, I think is very odd. There's a lot about Churchill I think that was impressive. Erudite guy, fluid writer, had a kind of style that I like. Used tobacco, which I love. I mean, there's a lot about Churchill, right?
That's in the pro comment.
It's cool for sure. But here are the facts. Like, he sold his country on a war using the idea that we must defend the territorial integrity of Poland. There are other reasons. That was the main reason, right? Poland. Okay, maybe that's a reason. Then 4 years later, he hands Poland to the Soviets.
After a bloodbath.
Yes. This country that we went to war on behalf of, I'm handing it to a worse master, a more totalitarian master, or at least as bad.
Yeah, I mean, the only other one who, or one of the only other two who rival.
Right,
him,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's right,
exactly. I don't know. I guess you could say if Hitler had won the war, could he have then killed more people than I guess we'll never know. But yeah, still up there.
Okay, so that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem.
Jordan and Kobe.
Exactly.
You could debate.
But clearly you don't care about Poland if you just handed it to Stalin.
Or clearly it didn't work.
Or like, something. Right. There's a massive disconnect. So that's the first fact. The second fact is he was rejected by his own voters right after the war. So they actually weren't so impressed by his leadership. And the third fact is that war destroyed Britain. Yeah. And that country is a depressing husk right now. I go there a lot. Unfortunately, I don't want to go there. It's the most depressing place I can imagine.
I went to Europe a few weeks ago, and I'll be honest, they call themselves the Museum of the World. They're past their prime. Let's just say that.
Totally defeated in some deep spiritual sense. And it's embarrassing to go there. So you destroy your country on behalf of Poland, and then you hand it to Stalin. Like, those are the bottom line facts about Churchill. There are a lot of other things to say about him, but those are the salient points. How could anybody think that's good?
Well, in Pat Buchanan's...
Seriously, what is that?
100%. Pat Buchanan's book, Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. The unnecessary war is in quotes, because that's not Pat Buchanan saying it. It's a Churchill quote. That Churchill, after the war, said it was the most avoidable, unnecessary war afterward. He took Britain from being the most powerful nation in the world to being totally defeated. They lost that war as much as anybody else did.
But look at it now.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
By the way, there's so many like ripple effects of this too, because they also, the whole situation with Israel Palestine, this is also a result of the British Empire being defeated, right, and being driven out. So there's so much to this.
But why defend it? That's the way. Look, I'm not even judging Churchill. I may have made similar decisions. I've made so many bad decisions in my life. I'm not even judging. I'm just saying 80 years later, when we can see clearly the aftermath, how could you possibly defend that?
Right.
And why would you want to?
And also, I just, there's a reason. I mean, there's lots of reasons why America was so successful as a country. But part of the reason really was the brilliance of our founding fathers and the system that they created. I mean, that's a huge part of it. And there's like it's like when George Washington's farewell address where he warns about entangling alliances.
Yes.
And there was something really profound that they saw there. And this idea, and this is a real problem with it's like, why would we even want Ukraine and NATO? Why do we want to make war guarantees for countries that we have neither the resources nor the political will to actually defend in the case of a war?
Nicely put.
Look, I mean, first off, we're broke. We're $34 trillion in debt. We can't afford our own wars, let alone everybody else's. We're literally, it's so cartoonish. We're borrowing money to then go, it's like if I was giving my sister money and my cousin's money and all of them, but I'm putting it on a credit card. You know what I mean? Like I don't have the money, but I'm such a great guy. I'm helping my whole family. It's like, no, you're not in a position to do this.
But they're not even our family.
Right. And they're not even our family. I'm just helping some random guy.
Literally some junkie you met at Safeway.
Yes, that's a better analogy. That is a
Yo, did he just call Ukraine a junkie you met at Safeway?
better analogy for Ukraine than my sister, to be honest. Yes. And so it's just totally absurd. But then also at the same time, look, war's horrible. There's always some type of conflict going on in the world, and it's awful. But the question is would you be willing or
I gotta interrupt Dave for a second. I'm loving this new Tucker Carlson. The post Fox News Tucker Carlson, when he became independent, he's a different man. He's opening up.
Would you be willing to send your kids to go fight and die over between, to determine whether, the Donbass region is ruled by Kiev or Moscow? Is that important enough to you? Because to me, it's a very easy answer, which is no, I would not be.
But would it be worth killing 1 million Ukrainians? Yeah.
Right, yes. But I'll put a flag in my bio and support my politicians printing money to send over to them, or I should say printing money to then buy from weapons companies weapons to then send over to them a mix of weapons and cash or whatever. But yeah, I mean, so to me, it's
would you mind though not referring to them as weapons companies but defense manufacturers?
I'm sorry, yes, that's right. The Defense Department, the defense manufacturer, the intelligence community, that's my favorite one. The community, they're all just gardening with each other and stuff, It's about a lot in the wake of World War II, the creation of the CIA. This was a revolution in the country where it changed who's running the government. And we think of the position of President of the United States of America being the same position that that Woodrow Wilson occupied or something like that. And it's not. It's a totally different position. Donald Trump did not have the same job FDR had. They were very, very different,
close.
And so there is, when people say, oh, you love America, it's like, yes, I love this country. I don't like the direction the government's going in. I don't care for these new powers.
And the Bush thing, I have to say, I could feel it at the very beginning. I knew him before he became president. I did not want to vote for him and didn't. I just didn't vote. I did vote for him the second time because you always get caught up in the other guy. And I knew Kerry, and I just thought Kerry was not impressive at all. So I voted for Bush. But, I see Bush still. I had a meal with him not that long ago, and talk about a defeated, sad guy, actually. Bitter, insecure, given to lecturing everyone around him about what a great president he was. And I thought, that really is, but that's the fruit of the tree, kind of.
Right.
Like, if you've had a successful life, if you've done the things that if you've fulfilled your obligation and done the right thing, you're not lecturing people about what a great person you are.
Right.
At all. Are you?
No, I don't think so.
No, that's failure, actually.
And just...
He knows.
Come on.
He knows.
To try to spin the George W. Bush years as anything other than an absolute failure. I mean, dude, you celebrated mission accomplished, and then we stayed in the war for 20 years.
I know.
Just a disaster, and left the country. And I mean, look, not only was it all completely unnecessary. I mean, like we had like the special ops response to Al-Qaeda cells in Afghanistan in late 2001, totally justify that.
Of course.
We had an opportunity to trap Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora in late 2001, and they, I believe, intentionally let him go so they could continue these wars. But fighting the decision.
Do you think that's what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, I highly recommend to anybody, Scott Horton wrote a book called Enough Already, which is like a masterpiece. It's a history of all the terror wars. And it seems overwhelmingly likely that they already had their eye on Iraq, and that they knew that if they captured Osama bin Laden, it'd be very difficult to sell another war because we got the guy.
If that's really true, I mean, that's unspeakably evil.
Yeah. Well, look, it was you can read like through the details of it, but there were a bunch of, they knew he was in Tora Bora and they were requesting backup, and they didn't give it to him. It certainly seems to be what it looks like. And then it was a decision that we're going to Kabul. Then it was a decision that we're going to overthrow the Taliban and fight a regime change war there, and then go fight the regime change war in Iraq. And like you said, judge them by their fruit. I mean, the results of George W. Bush's wars were there were trillions of dollars wasted, hundreds of thousands of people in these countries died, and our bravest young men blowing their brains out by the tens of thousands.
I know.
Those are the tangible results of what happened. And it's not even like we sacrificed that so that these countries are much better places to live. They're actually worse than they were.
Much worse.
Yeah. So there you go. We never had like someone like Joe Rogan or someone like you doing this show where, like in the run up to, say, in 2002, the run up to the war in Iraq, there was just no one like that who was like blowing the whistle with tens of millions of people listening to them and explaining how this is all lies. We have that now, and they're freaking out about that. And this is really why all the attempts at tech censorship happened since 2016, because they recognize that. Like, Donald Trump can tweet his way to the White House. He doesn't even have to go through us. So we better control Twitter and, YouTube and Facebook and all of these, Google and all of this. And even in their attempts to control it, they've never been as good as they were at controlling when there were just 3 networks and just a few big newspapers. And now I think Elon Musk really threw a wrench in their plans by buying Twitter. And so I'm very encouraged about that.
If we talk about social media censorship and how crazy it is, just imagine that, there's so many different social media companies. You got X, you got Instagram, Twitter, X, YouTube, whatever, all these different social media platforms, different owners, different rules, all that stuff. And then imagine a time 20 years ago, there's just like 3 to 5 main news networks, and they just controlled the whole narrative inside out. How much power and control they had. Insane, if you think about it. Wild. And everyone was brainwashed. Simple as that. Everyone was brainwashed. And for those that didn't live in the George Bush years, trust me, like I grew up in the U.S. during that time. It was not an easy time. Not an easy time.
I'm very encouraged about the fact that, people are kind of have access to the truth in a way that they never did before. I think ideas are powerful, and I think that all governments rely on propaganda. It doesn't work without that. And there's something in that that's really encouraging in a way. It's like, they have to convince us before they can just do it. Okay, there's 2 things that are seemingly contradictory, but they're not. Number one, democracy is an illusion. It doesn't really exist.
Yes.
You don't really ever have democracy.
Of course not.
There's, we get to vote in presidential elections. Like, even assuming all the votes are counted in the right way or something like that. It's like, yeah, you get to vote when these 2 parties, these private entities, decide who the candidate is, and then you can pick between the 2 of them. You know what I mean? Like, that's not really democracy. But in another sense, there's always democracy. And every nation, no matter whether they have free and fair elections or not, there's always there has to at least be tacit acceptance by the people.
Of course.
And if there's not, if there's 500,000 people out in the streets screaming at a dictator about how they want policy X, that dictator is like, I've been considering it and we will be implementing policy X. You know what I mean? Like, it's because at the end of the day, there's way more of you than there are of him.
Totally right.
And so when you can spread ideas, we have a fighting shot, I think. So that's very encouraging to me.